Good morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are, and welcome to the latest edition of Pre-Thought Hour, the show where we have a chat. That's we, my co-host and I, Tercia, with a guest. So let's introduce Tercia first of all. Hello, Tercia. How the devil are you?
Hello, John. I'm having coffee from a pitch black mug on a very cold evening after a terrific storm, as in roof tiles blown off and the likes of that. But we all seem to be in one piece so far, and it's lovely to be here again and to see you and to welcome our guest.
Yes, indeed. Well, I'm glad you survived. It did sound horrendous when you were telling me about it earlier.
Well, it was quite scary. No, it was. The wind was, I think we had gale force winds and there was some damage. And there's some damage on the coast as well with the storm surges coinciding with high tides. So, yes, but we won't say it's climate change because it's not.
Well, that's not the topic for tonight anyway. But
not at all.
It is. It definitely is. Anyway, enough of that nonsense. Here is Tom Enders, our guest tonight. Oh, look, he's got coffee. In another
but first coffee.
But first coffee. Yes, well, I've had and can I tell you a secret? I had some brandy in mine.
Ooh. Well,
I have anti-anxiety meds.
Well, I hope we can cure you of some of your anxiety because you have nothing to be anxious about. I'm completely harmless, and John is just an old geezer with some ideas. So let's go ahead and have some fun.
Excellent.
So I feel quite pure here because there's no drugs around. Even my alcohol is not alcohol; it's zero.
John's a prude.
Absolutely.
Not always, I'm afraid. No. Anyway, it's nice to see you, and I can't remember now, Tom, what it was that drew my attention to you, because we had some interaction on social media somewhere. And the thing is, I see so many people from different parts of the world, and I just forget who I've met and what the reason was, and because I'm lining up guests for the next month ahead, you see, so it's all
I do the same thing on my show all the time, so I did you a favor in case you were like me and went back and figured out the answer to that question earlier today. I had posted in one of the evolution versus creation debate forums on Facebook that there is no such thing as creation science and there is no such thing as creation scientists, because science involves looking at the evidence to figure out the answer to your question, as opposed to looking at the evidence to determine how to explain your already existing answer to the question.
Yes. If you start out with a conclusion in your mind, it's not science.
End of story.
So Tom, from that, I presume that you are neither. So you are not a creationist. Are you neither a creationist nor an old age creationist? Or because in South Africa, creationism is very similar to a thing than in the United States. And I was actually involved in a long session with South Africa's own version of Ken Ham about creationism, where they still trying actively and with some success, I have to regret, to get creationism taught in schools. And the main distinction in South African society is it's fine to be a creationist, but as long as you accept the old earth and you can even be an evolutionary creationist. And what's your view on that? How would you, if you have to brand yourself, how would you brand yourself?
I mean, technically, by definition, I would be an evolutionary creationist because I do believe there was creation at the beginning and evolution is true. But that lumps me in with a lot of people that I would disagree with on a lot of things. So rather than a label, I prefer to explain it as I accept 100% of science as presented by the experts because I'm not one. And then I say, but science has all these laws and rules that it rests on, and I believe something made them.
I see.
Okay, that's interesting.
So you accept that evolution is the most likely explanation for the diversity of life, but because we haven't yet solved the question of the origin of life, you think that that's where God belongs and kickstarted it all and then let it run.
I would go even farther back than the origin of life. When I say the laws and rules of science, I'm talking about things like gravity, things like heat distribution, those laws that are called laws by the scientific community that I learned about in Physics 101 in college. I'm simply not capable of believing that those could exist in a way that creates a self-replicating, self-balancing system capable of producing intelligent life if there wasn't some intelligence behind them. Many other people are, and that's cool. I ain't trying to change anybody's mind. It's just what I believe.
So, Tom, I just want to ask you one thing. What's your evidence for intelligent life? Anywhere else.
Well, I find that the best way to answer that question is to just say you, because then you can't argue with it.
So, the tongue is very. A friend of mine used to have the saying when there was a radio program once on where they were talking about the search for intelligent life in space, and she said, "My biggest question is whether there's intelligent life on Earth, because I don't think we found that."
Yes.
But having been a little bit facetious and with my tongue very firmly in my cheek. So you are therefore a believer that there is some sort of supernatural, would you call it a personality, a person, or are you of more of the brand of people who believe it's just some sort of the force or a force or something mysterious?
Well, I think that when I was assigning properties to it in my own thoughts, I definitely personify it in some ways, but I wouldn't really call it a person. I don't think we can really truly comprehend what it is, because anything that's smart enough to create and powerful enough to create the laws of science, I don't think I'm capable of understanding. Other people might be, but I'm not capable of understanding an intelligence that vast.
No.
Are you guys trying to point at each other?
I'm trying to point at John.
I got
John,
you.
I know you want to come in here.
One of the problems with this software is it doesn't reverse. So we are used to looking at ourselves in a mirror, and this isn't one. This is somebody else looking back at us. So it's confusing.
Yeah. When I'm looking at you, your stage left or your house left. I'm seeing you as house left, but your stage right.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay.
It confuses me. I'm not very smart.
The first time I was on stage, I was 6, and that's all it is.
I want to throw you what you Americans might call a curveball.
Go for it.
Because the laws of science are not laws in the sense of that we use the word law in our criminal justice realm.
Mm-hmm.
They are not constraining. They are not laws that must be obeyed or must have always been obeyed, and there are no sanctions for if you disobey them, if you see what I mean. So let me enlarge on this. The point is that there are laws in the sense that we've observed behavior happening in the cosmos, and it seems to operate consistently. So we've been able to describe it in this manner, and we've even been able to assign mathematical values to things like phenomena like gravity And therefore, we've given it the title law. But at the beginning, according to our current understanding of cosmology, there was no matter.
Correct.
So there was gravity is the property of matter.
No, it's
If there
not.
was no,
Matter has no properties because matter's not a thing. Matter is tightly compacted energy.
well, yes, if that's a way of viewing it, but gravity is a property of the amount of mass, if you like, the amount of compaction
Yes.
of the energy. And so the more mass, the more gravity. And at the beginning, there was no mass. The energy had not been yet compacted into whatever you're going to call it, whether you call it compacted mass or matter, whatever name you give it, it wasn't. It was just diffuse energy. And so that at that point, there was nothing for gravity to emanate from, as it were.
Okay.
So at that point, the so-called laws of science didn't apply.
Yeah, and yet they still existed.
No, I don't think they did.
Okay.
I'll tell you why.
I'll tell you what. Prove me wrong.
Okay. I can't. I can't.
Right, and I can't prove you wrong, and that's why I don't argue about these things or try to convince anyone I'm right. I simply tell people what I believe. And I'm more than happy to answer questions if you don't understand what I'm saying, but I don't defend my beliefs. They're just my beliefs.
Yeah, indeed. In fact, when we get to this level of, the beginning of time and space and stuff, the only correct thing to say is...
So we just don't know.
We just don't know. That's correct.
Right, and that's why I am an agnostic theist.
Okay, so I want to come in here because I am 100% on the same page with you, Tom, as far as saying that I don't want to convince people of what I believe either, because firstly, I'm not convinced that I can convince anybody of anything. I think the process of accepting beliefs is something that is extremely personal, and other people can point you in a direction, and you can choose. Well, let's talk about choice, but because I don't think we have choice. But let's, for the sake of for the sake of conversation, let's accept that one can choose to follow a certain path, and that can lead you to become convinced of certain things. But I don't think that I could convince any person of anything per se. But what I want to just take one step back to and focus on is, while I don't want to convince anybody, and I perfectly accept that you don't want to convince anybody either, you just tell people what you believe, and it's up to them whether they want to accept it or not. What I do want to try to communicate in all my interactions with individuals is that what one believes is important. And because beliefs are important, it's important to be able to explain why one believes what one believes. And because beliefs inform actions. And what the difference between somebody who accepts that there is a supernatural force out there and somebody even who's so if you say you're an agnostic theist, it means that you say there could be a God or there could not be a God.
But I believe, I say, okay.
You believe that there is, but you're not convinced.
I do not know that there is a God. I have been given no objective proof that there is a God, because that does not exist. But I believe there is a God.
And you believe because you see evidence for that. Because, and I'll tell you why I'm making that claim. I see myself as an agnostic atheist.
Okay.
If I had to label myself, that's what I would label myself as. So I don't believe that there is a God, but the reason I don't believe there is a God is that I have not seen evidence for such an entity. Whereas you, as an agnostic theist, say that you believe there is a God, and you believe that because you see some evidence for such an entity. Is that right?
I would be hesitant to use the word evidence, but off the top of my
Okay.
head right now, I'm having trouble thinking of a replacement. So I'll use the word evidence, but just everybody understand, it's not really accurate. And the answer is no. I think that whether you are an atheist or an theist is actually a tabula rasa issue. And I think it is probably related to thought processing styles. And the only evidence that I really have that's very easy to obtain for that is there's an older movie called Jesus Camp, which if you haven't seen it is a documentary. Okay. There's a scene in that where a child who has very obviously only ever been exposed to evangelical thought asks God to help him with his unbelief. He's an atheist. He doesn't have the words to explain it, and he's never been exposed to the concept, and he's an atheist. This is something you are born with. I'm a theist because I was born this way. I just didn't admit it till I was in my mid-20s. And you are an atheist, I believe, because you were born that way.
Hang on, I'm going to come in here because, of course, Tercia wasn't an atheist from birth at all, whereas I was. But I'd like to contest this idea.
I was raised atheist. I was an atheist till I was in my mid-20s.
I was a Christian until I was 40, a devoted evangelical Christian.
And I'm not going to dispute that. I'm not even going to dispute that to you, all of those religious experiences that you had in those 40 years are very real. But I am going to tell you that I have sat in meetings where I have had this conversation. When we get to the third bridge, cut to halftime, drop it from A major to A minor, turn the house lights blue and the stage lights red, and half the spiritual experience. Yeah, that was a lot of God right there, wasn't it?
Well, I have to say, let John talk, and then I'll tell you about the brand of evangelical Christianity that I grew up in, because there was no staging, no lights, no. I was a Calvinist. I grew up in the Calvinist tradition.
Okay.
Very strict Calvinist. It's a very, but let John talk first about
will do.
The tabula rasa. That's basically what we're talking about now. Tabula rasa.
Yes. Is it a tabula rasa issue?
Let's go to that. Let's talk to that first.
Before you go down any more rabbit holes and leave this issue behind, let me address it, because although I don't like the term tabula rasa, I don't think we're born with a clean slate. I think we are born with evolved behaviors in our subconscious, if you like, so that we have if you look at experiments with babies where one creature has something taken away from it, the baby is appalled, because that's in the newborn's mind, that is a sort of theft. Okay, and there are experiments to show this. But so I don't think that we are born completely clean slate, but I do think that we are born atheists, because the idea of a God has to be taught, and you can't teach a child until it has language, and we're all born unable to speak. So
John, before I lose my train of thought, I have to say that I don't agree with you on that. We are not born. I think we are born neither atheist nor Christian. I think we are born with a very strong propensity to believe in supernatural beings. I don't think we. I think, and that I'm saying based on the evidence of the fact that we, even before we can speak and even before we can understand formal language, we have a propensity to seek patterns and we ascribe an agent. We are agency ascribing beings. So
Sure.
It's maybe a technical point, but I think if I were put on the spot to say, are we born atheist or are we born with some sort of religious belief, that I think we have to be taught to be atheist in terms of the idea of a supernatural. In terms of a specific God concept, that is taught. But I think if we were left to our human designs without any input, most humans would have some sort of belief in some sort of supernatural being, because we ascribe agency by default when we don't understand things. So in that respect, I don't think that it's fair to say that we are born atheist. And I think that's important to say. I don't know what you say about that, John.
Well, do I get a chance?
Well, I'll graciously, as the co-host, I'll graciously give the host of the show a chance to respond to that.
I'm feeling like the sub-host at the moment. So I don't agree, because although I do agree that we have a propensity to ascribe agency, I don't think we're born with that. I think we observe that. I think we observe that when we see our mother nurturing us. And that at that point, I think we are seeing that things are done by agents. And from then on, we can seek an agent type answer to mysteries.
I agree with that. Yep, I agree with you on that. If you put it like that, I'm 100% on board with you, John.
That was a very interesting conversation to observe, because isn't the entire concept of a god just an adult replacement for what we get from our parents as an infant?
Exactly.
Yes, it is.
It's more of a transference of knowledge. Yes. And the real question is, do I have a propensity to transfer that to something outside of me or something inside of me? If the answer is B, it points me to atheism.
Yes.
And that propensity is what I think is inborn.
Oh.
Okay. Is inborn. Well, okay. I was actually, sorry, I have to confess that I was reading the comments, and John, we have 3 live viewers, and I think that we just have to say that there's some really interesting conversations going on in the sidebar, but people
one of them is Ortangelo, so he doesn't count.
I didn't want to say that. But so some people are going to have a hotter hell than others. And it's a very interesting conversation. I'm loving it. So, guys, get people to join in. Let's get more eyes on what we're doing here. So, I'm sorry, but so Tom, do you basically then? Let me just focus for a moment. Contrary to what many people say, it seems though I'm a woman, I can't multitask, because when I was reading with my right eye, reading the comments bar on the right side of my screen, I wasn't paying 100% attention to what you were saying. So John and I are basically saying that, and you seem to be agreeing that religion is the God belief. Let's say the God belief is a transference of what we experience as infants, is an adult transference of our infant experience. I agree with that. And I think there's a lot of scientific, psychological, social, psychosocial experimenting that corroborates that.
And some religions even call their leaders father or mother superior.
Just a few, just some. It's not that common, but there are the. Of course, I'm dripping with sarcasm. But
I think there's been one or two somewhere. I don't know.
I'm just somewhere along the line. But then, what did you took it one step further from that, and I missed that. Could you just restate that for me? I was just not paying proper attention because we've got 4 viewers. Fantastic! Welcome everybody.
All right. So basically, where I went from there, Tercia, is everybody is going to take that and transfer it. The question is, do I transfer it to an agent outside of myself, or do I transfer it to myself? If I transfer it to an agent outside of myself, that's going to point me towards theism. If I transfer it to myself, that's going to point me towards atheism. And that propensity to either look externally or internally is what I think is the inborn part of atheism versus theism.
Okay, I disagree with you on that one.
Okay.
And I'll tell you why.
I'd love to.
I can't speak for all atheists, but those atheists that I've had conversations with, and there's quite a few of them, we tend not to ascribe agency to anything or anybody, also not to ourselves. Most atheists that I know accept that what happens to us is a product of a random universe, and that we as individuals, as humans, as people, as creatures, living creatures, have very little agency. But I also don't ascribe any agency to anything else, because I see myself as a living organism in a very complex system, and things happen. I don't see any agency anywhere. I just see things that happen.
Like your storm last night.
I work better in concrete examples than in abstracts. So let me go through a scenario. Cool. Let me go through a scenario with you, and ask you a couple questions based on that scenario.
Okay.
If you lost your job, if John was like, "Get out of here, I don't want you on the show anymore. I know this isn't your job, but let's just pretend."
Let's just say, John, let's just say I'm getting £10 an hour.
And so then you're going to take the only logical steps and try to find another job, and eventually you'll be successul and get another job, and it's reasonable to assume, I think, and go on and be okay. But you also could decide that you're not going to look for another job and be a homeless person. You could decide that your new job should be dealing drugs. You could decide that your new job should be human trafficking. Why aren't you going to make any of those decisions?
I might. Depending on.
But why are you going to make the decision that you make?
Okay, that's not agency.
Okay.
What you're describing now is not me ascribing agency. So ascribing agency, in my understanding of it, is not the same as acting upon circumstances and taking responsibility for one's own actions.
Okay. I would agree with that. The question I was asking is, or rather the statement I made that might have gone past because I said it quickly, is your agency is in which of those roads you choose to go down. Your agency is in how, before you've actually responded, but when you're making the decision on how to respond, that's your agency.
Okay, I get what you say. If you put it like that, then yes, making a choice is me taking agency. Okay, but I get that, and you're right. If it's framed like that, 100%. But when I say ascribing agency, I don't ascribe agency to myself. And the fact of the matter is, a Christian who loses his job and seeks another job is not ascribing the action that he's taking to God, or if it's, or he is taking action. And we don't describe that taking action as ascribing agency. We describe it as, I'm taking an action based on circumstances. And that's why I make the distinction when I say atheists, or and most atheists we don't ascribe agency to an outside force. We take decisions the same way everybody else does. You are confronted by one moment, John, let me finish this thought, then I'll hand over to you. We are confronted by complex situations in our daily lives, and based on what we know and what we've experienced, we make what seems to be certain choices, and we choose and we go in certain directions. Christians ascribe agency to an outside force, but they act in the real world exactly like atheists do. Atheists don't ascribe agency to an outside force, but we still have to act in the world, and we have to make decisions and act upon them based on what happens in our real lives, in our concrete lives. John, you wanted to say something?
I did.
It's almost like I'm watching Leah and Mike here. Anyway, go ahead, John.
Yeah. Well, you keep rambling on so much that I forget the points I'm supposed to be making here. But
is that me now? I'm sorry.
What did I want to say? Yes, I wanted to say that all the mysteries that we have so far solved have turned out not to have been caused by any agent, other than if they are human fabrications. So what we need to do here is put up a separate category for what people do and the rest. And once we're looking at the rest, the cosmos, then we have no evidence for any agent. And I want to go back to the tabula rasa idea, because my contention is still that you can't be taught a religion. Let's go beyond the God to a religion until you can speak. And so a religion has, a doctrine, it has a scripture, it has principles and values, and you can't absorb those as a non-communicating baby. So I want to dwell on that a bit with Tom here, because he tells us a couple of things. He tells us that, first of all, he had some sort of abuse when he was pronouncing that he was an atheist previously. Perhaps you're going to tell us more about this, I hope, Tom.
Absolutely.
And now he's decided to label himself as a Christian anti-evangelistic cult activist. Now, I'm not quite. Can you unpack that, please?
All right. I literally have about 10 bullet points here that I made earlier today, so I didn't miss anything. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to run through those real quick, probably less than a minute. And then I'm going to let you decide which ones you want me to talk about. And that goes to the people in the chat too. Just, I don't know, maybe Otangelo can tell us what they said, or you guys can watch for me, because I'm not the host. I was an abused child. That includes physical, mental, emotional, and psychological essay. I was raised atheistic. I was a tangential satanic panic victim. In college, I became a theist. Later, I became a Christian. I went to evangelical churches purely because they had the best music. And if I'm going to be on the worship team, I want to play fun songs. I started finding out about cults because of Leah Remini, because she's awesome, and I've loved her since King of Queens. I was watching her stuff on YouTube about Scientology, which of course pushed other cult stuff to me. Through consuming that content, I realized that Christian evangelicalism is most certainly a cult. So I got out and started helping others do the same. As a matter of fact, I've spent most of the day today before this interview helping someone deconstruct some things that have led to situations of marital rape in their life.
Wow. Yes. Well, in that case, I think you're being better than God.
Thank
Absolutely.
you. Thank
Absolutely.
you. From the two of you, I will take that as it's meant and be very complimented.
Can I ask you? I'm sorry to hear about your upbringing. That was tragic, but it's not uncommon in. I was going to say in households where a religion is adhered to fundamentally, but that wasn't the case in your instance.
Not unless the religion is post-traumatic stress disorder from Vietnam.
Ah, right. Was that your father?
Yes.
Yes, I see. Yeah, war, I'm afraid it does horrible things to a person's brain.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So what I want to know now is, do you consider yourself to be a Christian who's simply against the evangelical denominations, or are you coming from some different point of view?
If I'm going to label myself with this, it's going to be a long one. I am an agnostic, deistic, Marcionist Christian.
What?
Okay, let me explain. Agnostic, Gnosticism versus agnosticism. I'll just recap it in case anybody hasn't heard what Bart said about it. Is knowledge versus belief. Agnosticism, Gnosticism is knowledge. I do not think it's possible to have knowledge of whether or not God exists. I think a God, any God existing, is a matter of belief, not knowledge.
Yeah.
So my belief is that a God exists. I think that God is best described by what the Christian Holy Bible actually says, not what all the Christians run around saying it says.
Ooh.
And that's the part that leads me to being both deistic and Marcionist. And if you're not familiar with either of those, deistic means God is not hands-on. God didn't help you find your car keys for the same reason God didn't stop the warlord from eating a child's heart before battle yesterday. Okay, because he doesn't do that.
That's the deist part. The Marcionist part, correct me if I'm right, Marcion as in the opposite of Paul.
I wouldn't say opposite, but opposed to, yeah, oppositional to, yeah.
So,
yeah.
So that's what the Marcionites. Okay, so that I'm not too familiar with exactly what their doctrine is or was, but they were in this. Marcion was an opponent of Paul.
Yeah, and what they believed is that for large portions of the Old Testament, there was actually a different God in control of heaven than there is now.
Right, an angrier one, presumably.
Generally, evil would be a good description. I don't like to use that word because I don't want to come across as anti-Semitic. Yeah. I'm not talking. I'm not saying anything about Jewish people or Jewish beliefs. I don't want to be anti-Semitic in any way. I do think that possibly they have misunderstood the Bible. That's all there is to it.
As do Christians, in my opinion.
Yeah, I would agree.
I'm interested that you say that being a Christian is actually accepting the Bible as if it's true. Is that right? Because there's a lot in there that is patently untrue.
Well, that's going to depend on how you define true. I don't think there is one single word in the Bible that is literal history, and anybody, like, come on, we have the Sermon on the Mount, 2 pages of text that are supposed to be a verbatim recounting of a sermon that Jesus gave in a time when we didn't have any way to record it except to write it down. Give me a break. Like, I'm I'm talking about the theology that it presents when I say that it's true.
What is the theology that the Bible presents?
Well, first of all, I think that the Bible is explicitly polytheistic, not monotheistic. I simply think it says we should only worship one God.
Okay, that's interesting. I agree with you that the Bible says that.
Well,
the Bible...
Go ahead. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Is this one God triune?
Well, now you're fast forwarding to the New Testament, and I don't want to make that logical leap, but I will answer that question when I get there.
Okay.
So, and I think that that's obvious because in every fantasy series of books that I have ever read, whether or not it is a polytheistic universe is introduced within the first chapter or two of the first book of the series. And we still tell stories the same way we always have. We have changed like the way I will make an allusion to the common mythos, but we haven't changed when and why I'll make an allusion to the common mythos. If those things changed, you wouldn't be able to read ancient literature without specialized training. So when I'm reading Genesis 1 and I see the sentence, let's create them in our image, this is the author telling me that this is a polytheistic universe. End of story, as far as I'm concerned.
Hang on. There's a difference between this is the author telling us that this is a polytheistic universe, and there's a difference between this is the author of a work of fiction telling us that he or she or they is creating or recreating their belief in a polytheistic universe. Do you agree with me that there's a difference there?
Yes, there's a difference, but there's not going to be a difference in the way I communicate whether the universe is the universe I'm describing is polytheistic or monotheistic, though.
So you believe in more than one God?
Oh, I believe there's a whole pantheon.
Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah. And during the Egyptian exile, Yahweh was usurped by another god, and that other god took Yahweh's name, and Job is the story of that battle, which is why but most people misinterpret it as Yahweh winning. No, Yahweh didn't win. Really read that part where he's battling the behemoth. And the identities of the behemoth and the god switch in the middle. And so then the other gods in control for the rest of the Old Testament. During this time, several of the gods are trying to, and what he's taken control of is the human afterlife. Several of the other gods are trying to get it back, and three of them decide to work in perfect harmony and perfect unison in order to be powerful enough to not only usurp the God that usurped Yahweh, but to maintain that balance going forward. And that is the Trinity. So it's, yes, the Trinity is three gods acting in perfect unison, in my opinion. And in an extreme nutshell, that's the story of the Bible that I see when I look at it.
So you're starting a new cult? No, a new denomination of Christianity according to your interpretation of the Bible?
No, I'm not on stage preaching about this. I'm not trying to convince anyone else I'm right. I'm just telling you what I believe.
Yeah, but you do have your own distinct belief that is probably different from all the other 30,000 denominations that we know about?
100%. And if you walk into any church in any country on any street corner on any Sunday and grab any two people and ask them enough questions, they too have different beliefs.
And that's,
so what does that
one
say?
of the reasons.
What does that say for the likely veracity of any of them?
Well, I can tell you that I don't really care. Here's the thing. I act on them has very little impact on my life. But all the impacts that it does have are positive. I have always been very driven to help people, but I'm more driven believing that there is an eternal consequence for it. I have always sought to understand the world around me. Having this framework to place that understanding in has allowed me to get past the question of, but why do those laws exist? If I didn't answer this, I would still be stuck there where I was 25 years ago in college. So what I believe helps me interact with the world, helps me be a better person. And that's really it. Like, if I'm wrong, then it's lights out when I die. And oh, well, guess I was wrong. And if I'm right, then hey, I'm part of a pretty damn cool story. Like, what's the big deal?
So I want to tell you what the big deal is, in my opinion, and I'm I'm really happy that most people are actually decent, because and I think that you are living proof that that most people are decent, and in the case of most people, what they believe doesn't really matter, because they don't act according to what they believe. They act according to the innate humanity that we all have, which makes us a social species.
And they do that irrespective of what religion they supposedly belong to or were raised in.
Absolutely.
Wherever you go, if you
however,
go to Pacific Islands or anywhere in the world, the moderates, those who are not fanatical about their religion, behave decently.
But the problem is that those people who have less of a humane view on life, those if we think of we are primates, and there's always outliers, and those outliers who don't have that empathy, who don't have that sort of midline of, if I have a choice to be mean or to be nice, I'd rather be nice. In my opinion, most people, if they have a choice to be mean or nice, would rather be nice, because it's beneficial to the group if more people are nice, and that's how we evolved. But the problem with religion and people's beliefs is that if you've been indoctrinated to have a certain belief, and your belief teaches you that the person who loves another person of the same gender, or the person who holds a different opinion to you, or the person who doesn't support the same political party as you, or the person who doesn't wear a headscarf, needs to be very sternly reprimanded, and you then act not upon your innate humanity, you act upon your belief, because your belief has been so strictly enforced into you. That is why beliefs matter. And in a country like the United States, where most people, who, even those who profess to be Christians, don't really live according to their Christian beliefs. They actually live according to their basic, innate, decent human nature. Yes. And you are a prime example of that person. But if you had to live according to what the Bible said, marital rape is not only acceptable, it's as it should be. That's what the Bible is very clear upon that, even the New Testament.
It's a man's right. Yes.
That's the problem.
The Bible is a product of a time when people were treated, when women specifically were treated as property. And that's not a correct way to treat people. And I agree with that.
I agree with you, but Christians believe the Bible.
Great. Okay. There's a lot of Christians that take the Bible literally. Can you do me a favor and refer to them as literalists? Because when I read the Bible, I see a book written at a specific time by specific people who lived in a specific culture. And I need to be intelligent enough to separate those things from the theology it's presenting. And I also need, because of my particular beliefs, to focus specifically on the New Testament, which, as John correctly mentioned, that is the case in the New Testament. But that's the thoughts of a specific person at a specific time in a specific culture.
Okay, can I just answer to calling people who believe in the Bible literalists? I'm 100% happy to do that. The trouble is, however, that whether I call the people who believe, who have a more strict interpretation of the Bible than you have, whether I call them literalists or not, has very little effect on how they're going to act, as long as there is such a book. As long as there is such a book.
I'm only asking for that so that I don't feel attacked when you're speaking and have to overcome that before I respond. So.
I accept that. I accept that. So, and I'm perfectly willing to do that. And when I was a Christian, I would have said exactly what you've said now. But since my deconversion, I have come to the conclusion that in Christianity, at least, the Bible is part of the problem. Because as long as there is a Bible, and as long as there is one Christian who prescribes that the Bible is the word of God, that opens up the door to those who want to be literalist. And that's why the problem is the Bible. If there was a way, if there were any way that Christianity could see the Bible as I do, it's a very precious work of fiction, like Herodotus and Odysseus and and all the many myriad of ancient texts. I love those texts, and I think Western society has been built upon it. But the moment we ascribe some power to that book, the Bible, it's the word of God. In that moment, if there is one person who believes that, you've opened up the door, and then it's just a case of, there we go. John.
And that's the whole problem. I contend that belief is overrated. After all, we know that beliefs can be false, and we also know that people can give up their beliefs, like Tertia has just described. She was deconstructed. So my contention is that we should devalue belief. We shouldn't think of it as being as important as we currently credit with being. Let's face it, there are certain things which are so highly evidential that they don't need any belief. You know, no amount of disbelieving could stop the truth of some scientific, and we were talking about this earlier, so-called laws. You know, they have been shown to be evidentially a good model of observations of the cosmos so many times that the chances, the likelihood of them not being closely representative of the actuality is negligible. And those things, it doesn't matter whether you believe them or not. They are what they are. And your belief or disbelief is not going to contribute a tot to their actuality. So I think what we need to do is turn down the wick on belief. We want to give it we want to discredit it. We want to say, if this thing that you are living by is only a belief, give it up. Live your life by evidential matters, propositions that have been repeatedly shown to be good and accurate representations of reality.
I disagree.
And be nice like Tom is. Tom is a nice person, and Tom would have been nice with or without the Bible.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I would like to respond to a couple of things there. To Tercia's point, first of all, can you do me a favor? List everything an abuser is completely incapable of using to support their abuse.
Okay,
yeah, you're done. You're done. There is nothing. Abusers, people who abuse other people, will use any and everything they can in order to abuse other people's. My father used to yell while he was beating me that he had to beat the bed out of me because there was no God to do it for him. It's that speaks to the abuser, not to what they're using.
But if you give them a book to use, then they have one more tool in their arsenal.
There's nothing they won't use. That's not a valid argument because there's nothing they won't use. The only way that's a valid argument is if we can do that to every tool they would use. And the only way we can do that to every tool they would use is to live in the construct from the Matrix.
My point about the Bible is not that abusers misuse the Bible. My point about the Bible is that even people who wouldn't otherwise be abusers now have the Bible to turn them into abusers.
And that's a problem with cults. 100%. It's why I am an anti-cult activist and I focus on the evangelical cult.
Can I, in the last few minutes of this show,
yes,
lighten the mood?
Absolutely. Please.
Let's go full circle. Let's go back to a light note.
I know you're a musician, Tom, and I see lots of instruments on your wall up there. Guitars, and is that a bass, one of them?
Yeah, I got 3 guitars and a bass in your view. I got an acoustic, a drum kit. There's a piano, keyboard over here.
Yeah. And so I'd like you to talk about that because I know that you have a website, or is it a channel?
Yes.
And so please tell us about your channel.
Okay, so my channel is called Jam Tag. That's why that's up for my name. It stands for Just a Musician Talking About God. My main show is an interview show that I release every Saturday morning where I interview victims of evangelical cults and expose the abuses they had, allow them to expose the abuses they have suffered at the hands of the evangelical cults. I'm doing this in an attempt to build enough information to show that this is systemic, that only an idiot could deny it. And I'm trying to get the word out there that the evangelical church, I can only speak for the U.S. because it's where I live, but the evangelical church in the U.S. is a dangerous, destructive cult that is destroying thousands of people's lives. And we need to stop this. And it's gone too far. It can't be reformed. It can't be changed. And I can prove that because when I called it a cult on one of the reformers' pages, I was summarily banned from that page. Everybody on that page who was a friend of mine blocked me, and it was never explained to me why. I was never talked to about it. Even the reformers are behaving like cultists.
Well, to me, that sounds like a very Christian thing to be doing.
Well, thank you. I think so, and I will tell you this: if I didn't identify as a Christian, I'd be a lot less pissed off at people using the Bible this way.
Yeah,
I'll get you on that one. Yep.
Yeah. Anyway, we're now in the rundown to the end of the show, and I want to announce that next week we have another interesting guest. This person is an ex-Muslim who is now a secularist and an atheist and is campaigning against Islam. And he is joining our team. Not only will he be a guest on next week's Free Thought Hour, but he's also taking on the mantle of being the Islam correspondent for the Global Atheist News, which is the show that just preceded this one. If you're into scheduling, I know nobody is these days. And he's also going to be a panelist on our Views on the News show, which we record tomorrow, and we give our opinions about the various ways that the religious people have impacted humanity in the previous 7 days. So there you go. That's all to look forward to next week. Tom, thank you very much. You've been wonderful. Tercia, You let me have some words occasionally. That's good.
But you know that last week, if you look back at last week, I just sat there with a mouthful of
Yes,
tea.
yes.
So I looked back at you this week.
Yes,
So
yes,
I had
okay.
my say. And
Yes.
I must say, Tom, I've had a fantastic time. I hope you have. And
Oh.
I'd love to continue our conversation sometime. Please make contact with me as well on my personal Facebook page. It's I don't remember my Facebook name, John. I'm so involved with Free for the Hour. Just get the details from John, please. It's TCDP, I think. On Facebook, please make contact with me. Send me a friend request. And I'd love to continue our conversation. Thank you so much for being gracious and funny and witty. And I would still like to talk to you about the piano and your musical career. So thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Thank you, John.
Thank you for having me. Have a great day.
What a nice guy. Say goodbye.
Bye.